Hey guys, welcome to another Visionary Male Leaders Live. I'm here again, Dimitri Wakuf, leadership coach and one of the co-authors in the book, together with Sarah Bellorini, the leader and the heart of the project. And we have another co-author here, Bodhi Aldridge, who is going to talk today about leadership and presence, more specifically presence. This is his chapter. We're going to dive into it a little bit later. But first, we can start with Sarah, who is going to share with us what was the main reason she decided to invite Bodhi in the book.
Thank you, Dimi. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us on live or the replay. And hey, Bodhi, g'day. G'day in Australia, and it's nighttime in Australia. So thank you so much for joining us. So I met Bodhi through Andrew Priestley, actually, who's the publisher of this book, of our book. And the first time I spoke to Bodhi, like, as we all talk to each other on Zoom these days, don't we? And as soon as I saw him, I felt his presence. And that is not a word of a lie. Just this energy came from Bodhi. And I just knew immediately, intuitively, that he was a man that walks his talk. And then when I found out more about Bodhi, about his 35 years as a, business experience as a lawyer, as a business owner, as a leader of teams, and as an international coach, I knew that he had the background to come into this book and to speak from a wealth of experience. And for me, Bodhi really, really embodies what a visionary leadership is, because we've got the other end of the scale, which is toxic leadership, which is present in both men and women. And for me, Bodhi has his work, and also in himself, he really embodies this integrated form of leadership. So that's why it's just been such a delight to have you, join and co-create this book with us, Bodhi.
Thank you. I'll finish up now. Thanks for that. That was lovely. I'll take that.
Yeah, absolutely. Bodhi, share with us, what was your reason to get into this project and decide to write for this book?
Well, most of you have met or heard from my oldest son, Jacob. And Jacob was actually invited originally by Sarah and Andrew. And when he got the invitation, the first thing he did was send it to me. And it caught my interest. Jacob and I have worked a lot together, and obviously this topic is dear to our hearts, and father and son. I have 4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls, and Jacob's my oldest son. So it was lovely to feel the invitation from my son to come on this journey, and then meet Sarah and Andrew. And I think Jacob knew, this is a passion of mine. If you put together the masculine, feminine, and leadership, you're really hitting the sweet spot for so much of what I teach, and certainly my own journey.
Yeah, beautiful. So share with us then. You started with talking about what you teach and what you're actually focused on in your career. In the last, you said 30, 40 years you're working in the area. So tell us more about you. What do you do? Who you are?
Yeah, I guess fundamental, and it's fundamental to the book, is it's my hero's journey. And that's quite a navigation. My wife and I, Jacob's mother, Ramala, we've been together for 42 years. And, it's that ability and willingness to call me forth as a man and to go on the journey for myself and with her. And in that journey, what I realized over 20 years ago, having started as a lawyer, that I had a passion to I guess share what I was experiencing through coaching, through leadership training. And so I sold my legal practice in 2000, and since then have been coaching around the globe. And very much the essence of the relationship with ourselves. A lot of people talk about communication and relationship and think it's with another person. But as like your chapter, Dimmy, it starts with the relationship with ourselves, the communication with ourselves. 80,000 thoughts a day, and most of them are negative. So until we truly embrace self-love, as you so beautifully wrote about, Dimmy, and really what does loving self mean? It's very hard to show up in your marriage, to show up as a parent, to show up as a leader. And so that's been my own personal exploration since, I'd started it personally before, but changed a career around 2000. And it's taken me all around the world I work a lot with younger men, like 30s and 40s in the US, San Francisco, New York. I've got a lot of clients there that are really on their hero's journey, wanting to navigate marriage, career, mortgages. Yep. And then probably more in the UK, working with a lot of leaders and corporate and leadership teams. And it all comes back to the heart. It all comes back to presence. Yeah, whichever way you want to slice and dice it. It's the journey home first. That's the essence.
Yeah. I have one additional question, Bodhi. Thank you for sharing, your story and how you changed. You had, I understand, some transition when you went to coaching. So, what was the reason to decide to make this transition from being a lawyer, which is a little bit more like hardcore thing, you're a lawyer, you're making things like masculine type. So then you went to coaching. So is there something which happened, or was there something which happened, or you just decided to do that for yourself?
I think it's interesting. Most of us know now around the studies of the Great Resignation. Yeah, and I think I was just a little bit ahead of the time, and probably the age of most people thinking about that was the age when I transitioned, in my 30s. And it was really, one thing, and it's still true in me, is it's a bit like don't die with the music in you. Like I have gifts to give the world. I have people to meet and people to play with and people to learn with. And I think I've felt that I could offer those gifts differently as opposed to just being a lawyer. And I think that was the calling. And again, if we think about the hero's journey, we get the call, and then we resist, and we get the call and we resist. And then for some of us, we hear the call and we step out. And fortunately, my wife, Amala, was very supportive because, you can imagine successful legal career, 4 children, mortgage, private schools. It's like, you're thinking about doing what? The comfort zone would have been, at one level, the comfort zone would have been to stay in that lane. But my heart's desire was to play a different game. And that's the transition. And again, in the hero's journey, we go through the trials and tribulations. It's just having the courage, the commitment, the guidance to step through them.
Yeah, it's so true, Bodhi. And we all get the call, but we don't all answer it, do we? And it's what you've just said. It takes courage and commitment and consistency, and we can't do it alone. Otherwise we would have a totally different world. And it's so interesting, isn't it? Because if we all get the call, excuse me, and we don't answer it, or we can go into the fear space, can't we? We can go directly into how is this all going to look? And because we've got this limited kind of awareness of what could be possible. And this is that kind of visionary mindset and visionary consciousness and visionary space that certain people can step into. And when we can hold that space for other people, then more people can go on this hero's journey, and we can really change the world we can be transformed as humans, and we can create sustainable change in ourselves and in the world. And I think for me, the really big call for this, for the book is really just the tip of the iceberg. You know, it's a conversation starter. Like, this is a much bigger piece that obviously there are many other people in the world that are involved in this, but excuse me, the more of us that are able to step into this space, the less that toxic type of leadership exists. Because when we're not connected to our hearts and operating out of our hearts, then what's the opposite of that? It's this hurt, brokenness, fear, anger. So much anger, isn't there, that exists, and that's really that kind of burnout, disengagement. You know, it costs people and businesses so much. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to add that into what you're saying, because for people who maybe know that this is a different type of leadership that exists, they might kind of go, oh, that's all, it sounds all really nice for you guys. How do I actually implement this? You know, and I love the fact that you've said, I had 4 kids and a mortgage and all the things, and you still stepped out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, I think this is the invitation for all of us in this book. You know, we're extending that invitation to everybody, to all leaders, aren't we? Men and women alike. Yeah.
I think collectively the calls turned into a shout.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, and it's loud and people feeling it. And, you know, it's interesting. Joseph Campbell, of course, who was such a great teacher on the hero's journey, you know, he talks about, you know, follow your bliss and the money you miss. And there's a real distortion between authentically following your call, grounding yourself, presenting yourself in what's the next step, as opposed to, you know, we focus very much on the what have I got to do, you know, to my life purpose and things like that, as opposed to who do I need to be in this next step. And I think that's what he was talking about. A lot of people, you know, just because I'm passionate about surfing, I'm not going to be a professional surfer. But that could feel like my calling. So I've got to get present and grounded in, yeah, who do I choose to be, and what's my next step, and what's my next step, and what's my next step. And that's life purpose. That's how life purpose reveals itself. Yeah. And so we're hearing the call collectively, and people are looking for the mentor, they're looking for the guide. Yeah. And it's really, and if we look at the book and the teachings of the book from the different authors, everyone's hero's journey in their chapter. Yeah, fundamentally, as we all know, it's an inside out job.
Absolutely.
The hero has to go within and without.
And that's a great place to talk a little bit about the book, guys, because Sarah touched upon that she's just the tip of the iceberg, but actually this tip is very important, because this is what people will see, right? This is the place where people get aware on that, and then they go dive deep with that, and we can help with that, of course, all of us as coaches and leaders. But Bodhi, can you share what actually is the value of this book? Why this book is valuable right now?
Yeah. So collectively, we're in the middle of the collapse of the patriarchy. And remember, yeah, the masculine and feminine can be healthy or unhealthy. Yeah, as described in the book. And so the patriarchy is turned into the distorted masculine. And we're in the middle of its collapse. We can see that in the political systems, in the business world. We can see that in the Me Too movement. We can see that in all of what's happening. Yeah. And in the middle of that, what we're also experiencing is the rise of the feminine. And as the feminine in all of us, the healthy feminine, rises and the patriarchy collapses, you know, this conversation, yeah, this book, yeah, is it important to nudge the conversation forward? It's important to keep that conversation alive, because we're seeing it, we're feeling it. We may not have words for it, we may not have the context for it. Yet my personal belief is that's where we are. We're right in the middle of that. Now, that could be 50 years or 500 years, I don't know. Yet we're in the middle of that process. And I know for me, it's been about integrating my feminine as the collective feminine rises, as we rebalance the distortion, and we see the distorted masculine collapse. And, you know, it's exciting, it's scary, it's divisive, it's unifying. You know, all of those things we're experiencing, as again, it's almost like the collective shadow is on loudspeaker. It's like all of those aspects are like, okay, yeah, you reckon you worked your stuff out? What about this? You know, it's like, and again, that's the deep calling within us, and also that fear and potential to stay in our comfort zone or to become divisive or to agree with the fear. And so I think the book, the conversation, the tip of the iceberg, you know, and this obviously this movement's been going for a while in the bigger context, yet it's great timing, you know, what Sarah's put together, the men she's brought together, it's great timing to nudge that conversation forward.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we had with some of the other authors, we were just talking that you have these 15 different perspectives which are going on the same place, but from different parts, you know. So, and in this way, you can choose your own, or you can blend them together, so you can construct your own path towards integrating feminine and masculine. And it's really true that you said that toxic masculinity, the toxic masculine leadership collapsed because it cannot exist by itself. I mean, it's not natural to be like this. And that's something which this book really touches upon, to really shows that how we can do that together. We can be together, and that's the normal, natural way to do it. And yes, we talk a little bit, you could say most of the authors we talk about, of course, all of us talk about the feminine traits which can be implemented in leadership, but the reality is that, yeah, we implement them and we combine them with the masculine, which they already exist. Actually, we prioritize them. It's not that we remove masculine, but we just combine it. So that's something which I think people need to understand. It's not about removing the masculine part, but it's just combining and integrating it with the feminine, which is something which we're pushing away for so many years and centuries, I would say, lifetime. So, Bodhi, talk to us about your chapter and your contribution to the book, like the presence you're talking about. And we can see clearly that you have a really, really powerful presence here when we talk with you. But let us know, walk through the chapter and your message.
Sure. You know, and there's so much to talk about just on your last comment, you know, I could talk forever. So I'm glad you're steering me in a direction. Again, you know, this is such a broad conversation, and, you know, can be filtered very differently for people when we start entering the place of masculine, feminine, gender, diversity, power, all of those sorts of inclusion. And, you know, we all come out with our own filters and our own meaning. And so if I reflect on the chapter, and, you know, there's some incredible teachers out there that I've learned from around the masculine, feminine, you know, around the hero's journey, around the activation points for the masculine in presence, the initiation of the masculine into the feminine. Yeah, so for us to integrate, we have to initiate into our feminine and our relationship with the key aspects of the feminine. So there's some incredible teachings and processes and, you know, traditional wisdom around this. And so for the chapter, for me, what I was looking at is, you know, what are the key aspects of the feminine energy, that the masculine can integrate to be a visionary leader. And again, to simplify the definition through my lens, the feminine energy in the universe, the feminine energy in all of us, is everything that moves and everything that flows. It's like the ocean. It's calm, it's wild. It's constantly in movement. We see that in nature. We see that in Mother Earth. We see that in the galaxies and in the universe. And it's just a label, obviously. And most people can feel that. And so the key driver for the feminine, which was the first part of my chapter, is connection. The feminine energy is connection and love, connection and love, connection and love, connection and love. Yeah, constantly seeking connection with whatever that might be. To give you the masculine lens, so the masculine energy in the universe, in nature and in us, is that which presences and witnesses the feminine and witnesses the consciousness. Yeah. And interestingly, the key driver for the masculine is freedom. And having been married for 42 years, you can imagine freedom and connection having a dance for 42 years. It's like, and one of the keys and what I teach, and certainly with a lot of the couples I work with and a lot of the men I work with, is how do we keep the polarity? How do you keep the juice? Because if you lose the juice, you lose the spark. Yeah. And potentially you lose what attracted you originally in the relationship. And so these currents are running, and as many of the authors have said, normally we're predominantly in our masculine energy or our feminine energy, yet they live within us. Yep. And so, and the hero's journey, is a different journey to the heroine's journey. They're different experiences. And so for me around presence, what I know around presence is that one of the first aspects of presence through the gateway of the feminine is this connection. And again, the feminine energy is looking for connection. And as you know, and as you wrote about, Dimi, around loving self, it is connecting with self. That journey of connection with self, connecting with all aspects of ourself. Because again, if you're not connected with yourself, it kind of makes it a bit trickier to connect externally. And the three parts that I wrote about for those who are going to read the book tomorrow is connection, you have receptivity, and flow. And so if we think about those through the lens of the feminine, receptivity, which is such a feminine quality, and ultimately the ability for all of us to be receptive. And again, the gateway to receptivity is through our heart. It's the bridge, as again, Dimi, you wrote about, it's self-love. It's the bridge between spirit and third dimension. And so receptivity is such an important quality. And as a leader, it's so tricky to be vulnerable. It's so tricky. Because it's like there are multiple agendas, there are multiple personalities, there's multiple energy. And so the willingness to stand in your masculine and be open and vulnerable, connected to yourself, connected to your vertical current, is a very powerful experience for those who are in your organization or in your community. And what occurs is that when you learn this connection and receptivity, you start to move into this place of flow. And flow is a fundamental feminine energy. Again, remember, the feminine is everything in movement. It's the ocean. It's the wind. And when we move in our flow, in our dance, holding our masculine current, being open, being connected, being receptive, in my experience and the experience of my clients is it's a very different leadership style. It creates a very different relationship with your team, in your relationships. And, fundamentally, we have the map, we have the tools. The masculine presence activation points are different to the feminine activation points. But when we learn the activation through receptivity, through connection, and we get into the flow, not only do we experience a different world, so does our business, so does our team. There you go, Dimi. There you go.
Easy.
I'm glad we're recording this.
Well, you're obviously in your flow, Bodhi. It's beautiful to listen to you, seriously. To bring it back to some kind of practical, implementable things for business leaders. You've just said in businesses, businesses change, leaders change. Have you got some solid kind of examples that you could share, like how this different style of leadership does actually impact teams and businesses?
Yeah, I've got a client. I actually spoke to the CEO recently, Sarah, who's a CEO based in London, and it's a privately owned business. They're in 13 countries, and I've been coaching their leadership team now for a while, and I think it's fascinating. I love the way Google do research and come up with what we know around psychological safety and emotional safety. It's a bit like the neuroscience catching up with the monks who've been meditating in Tibet. I love the way that it's almost like the Western world or the studies catch up with what we already know. Mm. And I really do. The neuroscience is fascinating because people are really seeing the evidence, particularly for those who are high thinkers, data-based. Yep. And so what I experienced with this client, who I've worked with for several years, is when I first started working with them, they had 12 country leaders, so 12 leaders of their business in different countries. And the CEO and the founder are in the UK, and they're scattered all around the globe. And they invited me in to create connection and alignment. Mm. And the key to that, having run, so we would have at least 2 global conferences a year where we would bring the leaders in and facilitate a space for this experience. And what I know, Sarah, to answer your question, and such a beautiful experience, still working with them and incredible outcomes, is that the willingness was firstly the ability to create a safe space as a facilitator. Mm. It's all about being present, being vulnerable, being receptive. Just creates alchemy and miracles. Yeah. And the transformation in this group, which is predominantly men, has just been amazing. And that's, me saying that, but it's also the feedback, and certainly from Sarah, the CEO. There was something that we created together around vulnerability, around safety, around openness, around honesty, that has just accelerated the profits of their business. Like, her feedback is that we have created such a strong culture, such strong alignment, and such incredible commercial success. We didn't even know that would occur, but we knew we wanted to bring them together. Does that kind of answer your question, Sarah?
It absolutely answers my question, Bodhi, and it makes me feel quite emotional, actually. They're human lives that you've changed, and what's the ripple effect of that? It's not just about the business and the profits. These people, they're fundamentally changed at their core. They're going to be better husbands, better wives, better fathers, et cetera, et cetera. They're going to, my kind of big vision, I guess, is to impact a generation of male leaders. And what you've just shared is that's that in motion, that's happening, isn't it? And I mean, I grew up in country New South Wales in the 70s, and this kind of stuff, we didn't talk about this around the dinner table, self-leadership and vulnerability and emotional intelligence and all of these things. And if you look at, we know that trauma comes from up to 5 generations. Scientifically, they can prove that. I mean, I think if you look sort of energetically, spiritually, it's, as you've mentioned earlier, it's come from way back. But it's like we've been so unconscious about so much stuff, and then we also haven't had the skills and the tools to deal with it, and the people to walk alongside of us. And I love this description of the East and the West, the West catching up with the East. And that's another kind of form of integration. And I keep on coming back to this word of integration, which, is very, very powerful in your world, I know. So I just kind of wanted to comment on that because it's super powerful. And I think that, and Dimmy actually made this comment in a previous interview that we did, that it all sounds very simple, though it's not that easy to do. And I think that's the thing. It can be very kind of like, whatever. It's, it can be kind of like brushed aside maybe as, it's just such a simple concept. And I think that's my, I really want to bring that and say, guys, and people, stop and listen. And you said earlier, Bodhi, that there's a bit of a shout going on in the background somewhere. Somebody's got some interference. But isn't that interesting? Like, there is interference. It's like we don't have a choice anymore. I think that's what I'm wanting to say here. And you have to step up. You have to look at these. You have to answer the call. And even if it's from that sort of false self, ego-led, fear-based, more toxic self, not the true self, even if it's from that space where you're just like, I've got to get on board because of my business and because of the money that I'm making. If that's your first step, that's okay. But ultimately, this is the call to be not about you. It's the call to the thing that's bigger than you. And I just want to kind of offer that.
And the biggest block in every business comes down to an emotion. Always. Yeah. Every client I've worked with. The biggest block in every relationship comes down to an emotion. And the biggest fear for men to step into their hero's journey comes down to an emotion. And so...
Sorry, buddy.
Whilst there's been some fascinating work done around emotional intelligence, there's still, in my observation, an undercurrent that there's good or bad emotions. And as soon as we filter that judgment, what occurs is we create the split. The split in ourselves, the split in our relationships, the split in our businesses. When we realize, using the word integration, that it is all energy in motion, we cannot know joy unless I've known pain. Cannot know happiness unless I've known sadness. And so the great movement of emotional intelligence, the move into accepting that all the emotions are just energy in motion. They're all giving you information. And the more you can start to acknowledge that in a healthy way and share it in a healthy way, not in a way of blame or judgment, it unhooks everything. We've all been into a boardroom where you can cut the air with a knife. And then somebody tells their truth about how they're feeling and everything changes. And that's essentially, to your point, that whilst this sounds simple, it's not easy because somebody's got to go there. And they've got to take responsibility for their emotions in a healthy way and be willing to share. And that unhooks whatever block you've got in your business. It will always be an emotion. And that's the way to unhook it. And that takes leadership. It takes a vulnerable leader. It takes a courageous leader. It takes a leader to be honest with themselves and to build a leadership team where we're willing to share and take responsibility for our emotions. And then we can move through these conversations. Then we can really align to our vision and our mission as a business. And just to repeat, simple, not easy. Think about when you're at the edge of your comfort zone. Think about the most intimate relationship you have and when you hold back. when you swallow back that truth that you want to share. Because you want to keep the peace, you don't like conflict, you want to stay in your comfort zone. It's like, welcome to dysfunctional planet Earth, guys.
Yeah. Yep.
You're not gonna lead a business if your senior team play that game. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely so true. And I was just listening, and sorry if there is some sound from my side. There is someone who is cutting grass or something outside, so I can't stop it. But what's the most important here for me, which I'm taking from what you're talking about, Bodhi and also Sarah, is that actually learning to be present with everything which is in yourself teach you to really be masculine in the real definition of the word, because masculine, as you said, is consciousness, and consciousness is presence. And if you stay there, because all of us want to be masculine men, when you say men, we want to be masculine, strong, but this is the way to be the strongest. And I'm just taking it for me as someone who is part of this conversation, and I'm sure that people will take it for them, and that creates this shift in your mind of what is to be a man and masculine in this life, and this is to be present with whatever is coming up in you inside. And as you said, emotion is so important there, because it's so hard for people, especially for men, to stay with their shame, with their fear, with their sadness, because these are weak emotions. And we once we learn to do that, then we get so much stronger, so we can show up as a real leader. And there is a quote I want to share before I ask you the last question. Is one of my coaches, which I'm following, he just says, my being is the highest point of leverage in my business. And this is exactly presence, right? My being is the highest leverage in my business. So if you learn to work with your being and to be present, your business is going to go wherever you want, because it's who you are. So thank you for both of you sharing so many great perspectives, guys. And again, creating so many mind shifts here for people to see leadership and themselves in different way. And the last thing which you're going to talk about is your message, Bodhi, towards the visionary leaders out there. What do you want to leave them with from this conversation?
Just embrace your hero's journey, to all the men, and the heroine's journey. Yeah, just it's not about anybody outside of you. The only question to ask yourself each day is, did I bring my best self to the game? How did I show up today? Yeah, if you're willing to do that, be rigorous with yourself, get support, you'll transform every relationship. You'll transform your business, you'll transform your personal life. So often we want to make it about other. Yeah. And that takes the rigor, the courage, the commitment, the joy, the pleasure, the pain. Yeah. Be present with it all. Yeah. And do the work.
Thank you. Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys, for the great conversation and inspiration we had today. And have a really present day, both of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Bodhi. Thanks to me so much.
Bye.
Ciao.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so much. Okay.